Julie, how do I say your last name?
Jacks.
Julie Jacks. Okay, it's spelled fancy.
Yeah.
Czechoslovakia. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into this?
My original intention was to volunteer with hospice.
Okay.
After they took care of my husband and me many years ago and loved the hospice concept. And when I had time during the pandemic, after I stopped teaching, to call hospice companies in the area and ask them what their volunteers did.
Okay.
They said they did respite, which is definitely very valuable to allow the caregiver time away.
Yeah.
And then some administrative work in the office. I really wanted to do more than that and felt capable of doing more than that. And a dear friend of mine who I met in Widow Support Group after our husbands died, sponsored by a hospice, said, you should be a death doula. And I had never heard that term before. She knew about it. A friend of hers had just taken a course. And that's how she knew about it. As soon as I looked it up, I said, that's exactly what I meant to do at this point in my life.
Yeah.
To be of service to other people.
Yeah.
In a space that I'm comfortable in.
Yeah.
That a lot of people aren't.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with your husband? I didn't know that.
Sure. Yeah. My husband died 14 years ago.
Okay.
We had a very short 5 months from his diagnosis to his death.
Okay.
And we needed help.
Yeah.
And we don't have children, don't have family close by. We relied on friends. We didn't know about a lot of the other things that I know about now.
Yeah.
And that's one of my big passions now, is to advise people and educate people about how many compassionate professionals there are,
Yeah.
like yourself and myself, who can help in that overwhelming time of, gosh, what do we do now?
Yeah. So what was that missing link when you were supporting your husband transitioning? What did you wish you would have had in place?
I wish I knew about legacy letters and legacy projects to give him the opportunity to do that.
Okay, tell me about that, because I've never heard of it. I've heard of some like books. I think I've maybe seen a few things online, but tell me, what's a legacy letter?
So one of my first questions that I ask people when they start working with me is, what's the hardest part for you, knowing that you're going to die sooner rather than later? And they don't have to think about it. They already know. And usually it's, I'm not going to see my kids grow up. I'm not going to see my grandkids grow up. And I say, okay, let's start there. Let's write them a letter, sharing memories of the times that you've spent together, as well as maybe things you want to leave for them, hopes that you have for their future, lessons that you have from your life that they might not know about, stories, things that are important to you, your values, your dreams, and your hopes. And a lot of people don't know that they can do that, and they don't think to do it because they're overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I can come in and take some of that burden off their significant other, their partner, their family, their children, to do things like that with them, then they feel very comfortable with that.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. So my mother passed away, and gosh, we're going to get so emotional. But you're the perfect person to do it, right?
It's okay.
I had no idea about legacy letter, but when I knew my mom was going to pass, I had her write me a letter of just advice.
Yeah. So you did it without knowing the name. And there are other names in the Jewish tradition. They call it a vidui, which it has a lot of different, depending on focus. Sometimes it's a confessional. Sometimes it's just advice for loved ones. So some people write one letter to be read by all. Like that's what I have done for myself. Sorry.
Wait, so have you already written your letter? Like
I have. I feel like it's a living document on my computer. And sometimes I'll think of something like, oh, I want to tell them about their grandmother, stories that they didn't hear because they were too young when she died.
Yeah.
And so it's a living document, but I'm writing one letter for everyone. Some people write individual letters. Some people want it published or read at their memorial service or celebration of life.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of options. There's a lot of very non-traditional approaches to end of life and to celebrating life that people are embracing more now instead of a traditional church service. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
If that's what that person wants, great. Some people, I offer them and say, if you want to, you can have a celebration of life while you're still alive and gather all your friends and your family together and have a party.
Yeah.
And let you hear what they would say after you're gone while you're still here. So some people call that a living funeral. There's
Have you
lots of different
facilitated
ways.
anything like that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Tell me, what was that like to witness something like that?
It was very beautiful. And it happened very organically.
Okay.
Some people, even some of the family members, thought it was an odd idea. And I said, you might not think that it's appropriate, or it might not be something you want. But one of the biggest parts for me is advocating for my client.
Yeah.
Once they've made a decision, I say, you need to respect that decision. Yeah. And then they're like, okay, that's fine. If that's what she wants, that's what he wants, we'll do that. And then they realize how important it is for that person to be present with people and be surrounded by their loved ones.
Yeah.
And be able to soak that in.
Now, how about do you consult with like tricky situations? I'll tell you, this week I was supporting a gentleman who dad initially was on hospice, went home, everything was set up to this whole process. And then fear overwhelmed him, the father. And then he was like, forget it, take me to the hospital. And then there's a new stabilization. But the end result is he's going to be transitioning anytime soon. But I don't think the dad was ready. Now the son was, oh my gosh, are we hospice, not hospice? Do you support with kind of walking down that road with people?
Absolutely. Have a conversation. What changed?
Yeah.
Did someone say something to them? Did they think that that means they're giving up? That's what a lot of people think hospice means.
Yeah,
Giving
that's
up.
exactly what the son said. He said, I don't want my dad to feel like I'm giving up on him. If he wants to, we're going to the hospital, then let's go to the hospital. But it was like just so heart-wrenching to sit with him in that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of fear around death.
Yeah.
Our society's very death phobic, death illiterate, and they just they're in denial.
Yeah.
And sometimes even until the very end.
Yeah. And I actually did tell him about you. And I said, hey, there's this lady I can introduce you. She's a death doula. And he was like, what is that? I was like, oh, he's a man. He doesn't know what a doula is.
Yep.
You know, and he was just like, he's already talked to the minister. So I think in some people's mind, it's like just your confessional process. You're going to have your minister come, but your services are completely different. So give me an array of how your support could be given to families.
Certainly. So there is overlap in some of the services I offer and what hospice offers. So I like to address that, especially because hospice is amazing. I know a lot of people who work in that arena. Sometimes hospice doesn't have as much time. I typically only work with one end-of-life client at a time. I may work with multiple people on advanced care planning at a time, but I have as many hours as they want from me in a week, whether it's 2 hours, 3 times a week. It can be very practical things around the house, creating their space the way they want it, helping them decide who gets their belongings. It can be a lot of spiritual discussion, getting to a place of peace. People turn inward when they know their time is short and the outside world falls away. And that freaks some of the family and friends out. They're like, they're not talking, they're not engaging. I'm like, it's okay. That's natural and normal because they're thinking about their life. And maybe they need help processing some of those memories.
Yeah.
And I consider myself very spiritual. I don't have a specific religious affiliation. But I can say, what is bothering you? Why are you not at peace?
Yeah.
Because the goal is everyone hopefully to be at peace at the time of their death.
And so what are some things that people say that have just like...
They need to forgive someone or forgive themselves for something that sometimes happened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
That is still just coming up and nagging them as unfinished business. And people want to make amends sometimes for something that happened a long time ago. I've written letters to old friends.
You would help facilitate closing that chapter.
Yes. Or searching for someone on social media to find an ex-friend that friendship didn't end well. They want to resolve that or at least say they're sorry or say, this is why I did what I did, because they might not have been able to say it at the time. Sometimes it's about just processing a pain that they've had, a sorrow that they've carried, a grief that they never processed. Because they never had the opportunity, because they felt they had to be the strong one in front of other people. And now it's their time. And tears are very healing. So I welcome anyone's tears. I welcome the laughter. There's a lot of things and people catch themselves like, oh, I should be laughing. I shouldn't have joy. And I'm like, oh no, joy is a part of death. Yeah. Just like it's a part of life.
Yeah.
I also facilitate advanced care planning if that's not already done. A lot of people want to plan their own celebration of life, what that looks like for them. They can pre-plan their cremation, their burial. And in addition to letters, we can do legacy projects. Say a woman or a man is the big cook in their family, gather the recipes together to create a booklet to be given to everyone of their recipes. I did that with my mom and my aunt's recipes after both of them died for everyone in the family. Photography, scrapbooks, just a lot of different things that are very personal.
Yeah.
And there are definitely other businesses who will record people telling their stories and turn that into a book. I do it more on a smaller scale. The other part is planning for those last days of the active dying phase, whether they want to be at home. Who do they want around them? Do they want candles? Do they want music? Do they want people coming and going? Some people want me to help educate their family and friends to do that. Some of them want a doula present. And I have networked with many doulas in the area. And we can provide 24-hour coverage if that's what they want.
Wow, that's beautiful. What do you see as maybe a biggest regret that people have when they're transitioning? Do you hear anything that come up or
things that they left unsaid? And, sometimes when the doctor says you have 6 months, that hospice window, and I always say, I appreciate what the doctor said, but don't count on that 6 months. Say what you need to say now. Do what you want to do now. When they told my husband 6 months, it was 2.5.
Wow.
A friend of mine last year lost her husband to glioblastoma.
Wow.
At that 6-month mark, I shared that with her. And I said, you can say it every day.
Yeah.
But if you leave it unsaid, then that's gonna be painful.
Yeah.
And let them do. And people would say to me, are you going to put them on a macrobiotic diet or do something special? And I'm like, if I thought it would help, if the doctors thought it would help, I would.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to help at this point. He can have ice cream for breakfast.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't have to eat. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand is that people, as their body starts to shut down, they don't want to eat or drink. And forcing that is really uncomfortable for everyone.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard. And that's one of the ways we show our love is, oh, eat this. I made this for you.
Yeah.
But their body just doesn't need it anymore.
Yeah.
So a lot of the education that hospice does, palliative care does, along that lines. But when you see it happen, it's hard for people.
Yeah.
The changes.
Definitely. I know the last 2 years of my grandmother, she had Alzheimer's and stage Alzheimer's. It's such a horrible disease to watch, especially during the end. And just like you said, you never know. They could say 6 months, it could be 2 months, it could be 2 years. So when I finally got hospice services involved with her, they said 6 months. You're looking at 6 months based on what she went to a great care home. 2.5 years.
Wonderful.
2.5 years. And that last couple of weeks were so difficult because not only did the caregivers form an attachment with her and they still wanted to feed her, but I was like, she's not really closing her mouth. Should we still be doing this? Thank God I had Hope Hospice involved and they came out and had a speech pathologist come out and assess her swallowing. I had no idea that was something that you would do.
Yes.
But it also gave permission, I think maybe emotional permission for the caregivers to like, okay, we're going to stop. Because I think they needed that more than me. I was like, okay, how do I make this end? This is horrible. I know she wouldn't want this.
Yes. Now, I lost a dear friend to dementia last year. And walk the walk. I'm walking the walk in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And I got a lot of education about that through the Alzheimer's Association and educated her daughters who were far away. And I visited her and I saw those changes. And it is a very brutal disease.
Yeah.
And again, she had good care as well. And I saw her become peaceful at the end. There was a period of agitation, but then she really became peaceful. We played music. I held her hand. And I tried, and I also learned that lesson to stop trying to get her to eat.
Yeah.
Because I would always have my lunch and I started to feed her. And then after 3 bites, I'm full. At first, that was really hard for me. But then I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's education. And that's another passion for me to go into the community and to go to whether it's a Rotary Club, a church group, any group will have me speak. I want to come and speak about end of life issues, about advanced care planning, and what a gift that is that you give to the people left behind.
Isn't that so true? Yes,
it is.
That is very true. I've done the legal and financial planning with my other grandmother, but we haven't even had this conversation on what does she want to stay in the hospital? Does she want to be brought home? What does she want this to look like?
Yeah.
So,
and there's a lot of contingencies and you can't ever plan for all of them. You know, when my husband and I had the conversation, I want to die at home.
mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, I hear you.
Yeah.
And I understand that would work for you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would work for me.
Yeah.
Knowing that I want to stay in the home after.
Yeah.
And I could be that honest with him. If it had happened that way, it would have happened.
Yeah.
He got to a point where he weakened so much that even after I asked my cousin to come and help, we couldn't move him. So he actually died at Brun's house through Hospice East Bay.
I love Brun's house. Why don't we have more of Brun's houses?
Oh, I know. I wish that were true as well.
Yeah.
When I'm on trainings with international doulas all over the world, and a doula is part of the hospice team in a lot of countries that have national medicine, and they have a lot more hospice facilities. And that's a misconception a lot of people have, that hospice is a place, not a way of taking care of someone.
Yeah.
So I was very grateful that Brun's had a bed. Otherwise, George would have had to go to the hospital.
Wow.
And that would have not been what either one of us wanted.
Yeah.
But again, we all have physical limitations to what we can do.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's the educational piece.
Yeah.
And then I also work with the family and friends after a client has died in that early grief processing and in talking through what happened and what worked for them and what didn't work, maybe something that could have been different, and get them also to a place of peace with what happened. And then I have a lot of networking also with different therapists. Like I'm not a therapist, but I know a therapist who specializes in grief, who also specialize in helping caregivers during that process, and who came from social work in medical backgrounds in palliative and hospice care.
Yeah.
Because the caregivers are often overlooked as well.
Oh, yeah.
As you well know.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And to be able to be there for them as well. And sometimes, even though I'm working with a client, I might be working with a client half the time I'm there, the other half I'm sitting with a caregiver. What do you need?
Yeah.
Was there anything I can do to help you to add a resource in? What do you need? And like I said, if they need a trust attorney, if they need hospice, if they need home care, then I have companies that I know and trust that I can refer to.
Yeah.
And that's what's really been important to me too.
Oh,
is
for sure.
Finding, because when I first started my business, I was like, how are people going to find me?
Yeah.
Because I had never intended to open a business. I didn't know how to market. So I started very slowly. And then I found the senior networking groups of all the other businesses who care for seniors.
Yeah.
And once I found my people and I started really getting to know people like you, and I'm like, okay, these are my people and these are the people that I need for my future clients.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Have you ever experienced anything like supernatural? I know I have with one of my aunts who had passed away. She had lived in Las Vegas for many years. She was wild. And was out of touch with the family for, maybe 25 years. And we hadn't heard from Auntie Holly in forever. Anyhow, my mom got a call from a hospital in Nevada and was like, hey, your sister's dying. She wants to come home. Of course, my mom says, yep, bring her home. So she lived with us for about a year. But when we were down to that last week, we were at the hospital. There's probably about 16 of us at John Muir in Concord. And they said, hey, it's getting closer. We're going to put all of you guys in that back room. So they put us in the back room. And we were within maybe an hour of her transitioning. And we were just around her bedside, talking, praying. And my mother-in-law was praying over her. And we were all gathered around her bed, all of us. And it was like, as soon as she took her last breath, the whole entire room had a collective sigh, like a sonic boom in the room. It was such a supernatural experience. Like, all of us lost our breath in that moment as she left. And it was like, I've never experienced anything like that. And I've been there for a lot of my family members who have passed on, but nothing like Auntie Holly. Auntie Holly was like a sonic boom out of that room. And
yeah, I've seen something similar, maybe not that grand a scale, but I've also seen people like when I mentioned my friend Carol, who was very peaceful. A lot of people see and hear and feel the presence of a loved one who has died years earlier. And while I was talking to her, looking just like you and I are, she kept looking over into the corner. And I asked her, I said, Carol, who's there?
Yeah.
And she said, my mom. And I'm going to see her soon. And that brought her peace.
Yeah.
And a lot of people experience that. Not everyone.
Yeah.
And some people it's very upsetting for, especially for the other people who maybe don't believe in that
Yeah.
or don't accept that as a possibility.
Yeah.
There's a great book called The In-Between, written by a hospice nurse, talking about instances like that. And one of the books I read through a training was The American Book of Living and Dying by Richard Groves and another author whose name I don't remember right now, but I took a lot of courses from him, and he was a hospice chaplain. And there are case studies in that book where people literally wait for someone to arrive before they die. They need to see that person or be present with that person. Some people wait for someone to leave. I believe my uncle, which is one of my first experiences with death, his wife, my Aunt Dorothy, was a nurse, and she stayed with him until hospital visiting hours were over. And this is in the 80s before cell phones.
Yeah.
And pretty much right after she left, he died.
Yeah.
And the phone was ringing when she got home.
Yeah.
And I don't think he wanted her to be there.
Yeah.
And, you know, that sounds strange to say it, but I really do believe that.
Oh, for sure.
And,
yeah.
you know, I was with George at Bruns holding his hand, and it was very peaceful and calm. And I talked to him. A lot of people, I encourage people, my people who are with my client, continue to talk to them even when they're not responsive.
Yeah.
The experts say that hearing and touch are the last things to go, even though they're not talking anymore. Touch them, talk to them, pray with them, play music, whatever you want to do that you think they want. And people can spell that out if they want to.
Yeah.
And no one chooses a diagnosis or a terminal illness, but I feel like I empower them to make some choices about how they want to live the rest of that time and to express themselves to their loved ones, what they do want and what they don't want.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like people are a little bit more open with you since you're like a neutral third party? You don't really have the history of or any narratives that are being carried throughout life. They can just lay it all down.
Even in doula training, they provided us, because hospice, they survey and kind of study the people in hospice, and they have a lot of qualitative information and quantitative information over the years. And what a lot of those people say is they're very willing and able to have compassionate professionals come in and help to take that burden off of their family, which the family doesn't feel burdened, I don't think, but they feel that.
Yeah.
And they really do appreciate that neutrality.
Yeah.
And that ability to express something where I'm not judging them. There's no history. I certainly get, like you do, we get connected to our clients to a point, but we were also taught about boundaries, about self-care. And that's something a lot of people asked me when I told them that I started working as an end-of-life doula. Isn't that really depressing and sad? I said, no, it's really not.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's about what I can provide to that one person and their circle of care to make it better for them in that point of time.
Yeah.
And I will take care of myself along the way. I'm a big ritual person, and I offer rituals to my clients and their families, and I do them for myself.
So what would be some of those rituals? I'm in with the rituals.
Yeah. So the format that I typically use is a release and an affirmation.
Okay.
So I say, I release my client from their pain and suffering and their illness, and I affirm that I did the best I could to provide them with care at their end of their life. And just maybe a few more sentences like that were specific to the individual case.
No candles, no smudging.
Oh, I definitely do candles. I do bells. I do music. And I might even have a photo, a small little altar. Some families include me in a celebration, whether it's weeks or months later. Some don't, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I definitely make sure that I have a little bit of closure at the end of working with the client, and then I can take a pause before I'm ready to work with another one.
We're in all of these assisted living facilities. We're in all of these assisted living communities all the time. And residents die every day in there. And sometimes I don't see a way to honor their life and legacy at the time that they were there. I think maybe one community I've seen that done in Emeryville. But yeah, it's heartbreaking.
It is. And I think it's hard for them. I know some people who work in the communities.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard for them to balance do we make a big deal about it and do the honoring publicly?
Yeah.
And then put people on edge maybe? Or do we just do it privately and let people just are aware of what happened?
Yeah.
So I think that's a hard that's a hard balance for those people because, like you said, it's a very common occurrence.
Yeah.
I think years ago, they didn't even let the ambulance or the mortuary pull up to the front door. They had to go to the back door. It was very quiet. It was very in the shadows.
Yeah.
I think as people embrace the fact that let's celebrate, let's enjoy the life that we have, and let's celebrate our friends when they're gone, whether I know them for 50 years or for 3 months that we've lived next door to each other in a place that we didn't originally want to come to, but we're really happy that we're living in now.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard. I think it's hard for people to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I have a lot of examples. Sometimes I do ceremonies, like when we gather together for our grief processing, I have learned this from a chaplain, get that in disintegrating that rice paper and you write something on there about the experience of the loved one's end of life. And then we put it in a bowl of water and you just stir it up and the colored ink just swirls in the water. And then you pour that on a plant and you're just like, it's okay. Life does go on.
Yeah.
But also encouraging people to grieve and mourn as they need to.
Yeah. Now, what about for folks that maybe they don't believe that life goes on and they just, when your lights out, lights are out. My grandfather Francis, that he made it very clear to me, I don't want any minister. I don't want any priest. Do not. Lights are out. And I was just, I don't think I respected his boundaries. So that last hour, I called my father-in-law over and I was like, hey, Grandpa, can you come over here and pray? What's that? And he responded to that, literally, physically. I won't go into it, but I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. But I was a little scared. I was like, but maybe we should say these last rites or something. Like,
so when I said life goes on, I meant for the people who are still here. But each person, like I said, everyone mourns differently. Everyone grieves differently. But for someone like I don't believe there's anything after death.
So just
personally,
when you're out,
I don't.
Out.
But for other people who do, I've had that conversation with my sister-in-law. My brother, Chris, died suddenly at 57 of a heart attack. The shock of my life, hers, their children's.
Yeah.
And she believes in heaven and believes that she'll be reunited with him in heaven. And part of me wishes I believed that.
Yeah.
I don't. I wasn't raised like that. I don't believe that. But I support her in her belief.
Yeah.
But she specifically asked me before everybody was going home, can you tell the kids? And they were in their teens and early 20s. And she's, can you tell them what you believe? Because I know you believe differently. And I said, what I believe is that I carry Chris and my parents and my grandparents and my aunt and my uncle with me in my life. That's how they live on.
Yeah.
And I think of them. I speak of them. I have their photos. I hear their voices in my head. I talk to them. So they live on in those ways, but I don't believe that they live on in a heaven way.
Yeah. And how did they take it?
They said, okay. And they're just figuring out for themselves what they believe. And like I said, I never had it. My husband died when I was 50 and so did my dad. My dad died 8 months later. So I was 50. So I can't imagine. My youngest niece was 19 when her dad died.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the impact of that.
Yeah.
But I was just with them last week, those two daughters, and they now have children of their own. And we talk about Chris and how much we miss him and love him. And we wish he was there, but we still remember the things that he talked about and were important to him and his values. And we carry them on in our lives.
Did you have any dreams about your husband after he had passed?
I have. Very lovely, just every day sitting around the dinner table having a conversation.
Okay. Nothing that felt like, oh, he may be somewhere else and he's communicating with me.
No. I've had dreams. In my experience, you can't invite them. They just have to come whenever they're going to come. My friend who I told you about who lost her husband last year, she asked me about that.
Yeah.
She says, I haven't dreamed of him yet. Like, there's no timeline.
Yeah.
When she was even asking me in the same conversation, she said, I noticed you don't wear your wedding ring anymore. And I said, remember, for me, it's been 14 years.
Yeah.
She goes, I don't want to take it off. And I said, then don't take it off.
Yeah.
There's no rule. You're the only one who can decide that for yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoy having the dreams about them.
Yeah.
And like I said, they're typically very warm and loving and just normal and everyday things.
Yeah.
But it's the adjustment, of course, is very difficult. And, so when I work with clients and I say, you have your own timeline in terms of cleaning out the closets,
Gosh, yeah.
doing all those things. I said, I'm happy to come back and help you with that if you want me to. I said, I also know professionals who that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody decides that for themselves as well. And like I said, just really expressing it as just an invitation and as all the different possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the celebration of life, I helped a family that I did not work with their mom, but the two daughters actually reached out to the care manager that they had because they lived far away.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked her to help them. And she said, I don't do that, but I know somebody who does.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put this, and I never met the woman, but they told me about her, and I had this document about all the different options. And that at first overwhelmed her for the planning. And I said, just pick the ones that are important to you. Just focus. This is a very broad.
Yeah.
You can narrow it down. So we got it narrowed down very quickly. Very casual, very non-traditional, non-church, just all of it. And they found it. And it was beautiful. And then meeting her grandchildren and their friends who came to celebrate her life.
Yeah.
It was lovely. And to be able to help them. And they said, we couldn't have done it without you. And I said, thank you.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, I think you could have, but then I don't want to say that because I don't want to dismiss that.
Yeah.
But I was very happy to help. And it was something that comes easy to me, but it doesn't come easy to them.
Yeah.
And to be able to help them,
especially when you're
create
grieving,
that.
if I have to call and get in a schedule and do that, oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a heavy emotional lift to even pick up a
Yes.
phone and try to schedule something.
Right.
And say, hey, this is what I need to tell like.
Yes.
My head's not even in it.
Yes.
Forget it.
Yes. And that's something, like I said, that a biggest thing that I like to remind people when I speak is you don't have to do it alone. There are plenty of professionals, and we're very fortunate in this area with a variety of communities for people to live in. Lots of people like yourself and myself who can help people where they are in their home or wherever their home is, and be able to provide those services as needed.
Yeah.
And just recognize and just offer them other questions. And I get a lot of times I'm like, oh, I never thought about that before. I'm like, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's, partly why I'm here.
Yeah.
Is to just offer that to you as a possibility.
Yeah.
If you don't want to prepay your cremation or your funeral and you want your people to do it after, that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as they understand that.
Yeah. So were you doing this work during the whole COVID time?
No. My website, I consider my launch date is November of 2021.
Okay.
So it was still partially shut down, but that's when I started finding the senior care groups and the networking and really started getting out there.
Yeah.
Other than just knocking on doors and handing out my flyer and my business card saying, I'm here, kind of thing, because like I said, I didn't know that part.
Yeah. And what are some common questions when you tell people, oh, I'm a death doula? What are they?
What is that? People have heard of birthing doulas.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, the man who coined the term death doula, he patterned it after birthing doulas. The recognition, that's a time in an individual's life, a couple of families' life, where they need extra support from a compassionate professional. And a lot of people say, do you work for hospice? I do know one end-of-life doula who's full-time employed by a hospice in Solano County, but typically we're independent and outside of hospice. But I get referrals from hospice and from care, just like I refer to both of them.
Yeah.
And then a lot of it is, how does it work? And I say, well, just set up a schedule. If you want me, like I said, 2 hours, 3 days a week, or one day a week for 4 hours, whatever. And I'm very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do it in the daytime, in the evening, on the weekends. If you want me to speak with your family, we want to do a family meeting. We can do that. If people are out of town, we can do it on Zoom. Get everybody understanding what's happening and what's projected to happen in the future.
Yeah.
But again, if there are disputes within the family, I know a mediator who is a senior mediator who can come in that I could call in if it's above and beyond what I feel like I can do effectively. A lot of it is just, how does it work?
Yeah.
And, some people really are hesitant to have people come into their home that they don't know yet.
Yeah.
My husband really wasn't really happy about having the hospice nurse and social worker pop in. Mm-hmm. But, he got used to it.
Yeah.
And it was okay.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that he was comfortable with in the beginning. And a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
And they feel like their personal space is violated. But I go to where people are. And if you want to sit in the kitchen, we'll sit in the kitchen.
Yeah.
If you want to lay in your bed and have me sit next to you, that's okay too.
Yeah.
So they become comfortable with accepting the help. Because again, I used to be very reluctant to ask for help. even in the beginning of George's illness and other challenges in my life. And now I'm totally over that. And when I just say, I need help.
Yeah.
And this is what I need. And so I had my list ready because I had a lot of friends rally around me after George died. They're like, what can I help you with? Like, you still have a truck, right? I'm like, okay, I need you to take this stuff to the dump.
Yeah.
And I need you to pick up some new furniture. And I had lists and people were cooking and doing different things. And so to be able to offer to people are really willing to help. They want to help.
Yeah.
And even my brothers and family back on the East Coast, they're like, we really can't come to visit, but what can we do? And I'm like, hey, send us some crabs, call George and talk to him on the phone.
Yeah.
And my friend Carol that I spoke about, who had the dementia, she at that time lived 5 doors away.
Right.
She never came to see George. And I'm not sure why that was, but she called him every day.
Aww.
And she dropped off chocolate for him at least once a week.
Nice.
Because they shared a love of dark chocolate. And I kept saying, he doesn't look any different. And she's like, that's okay. And I said, okay. And I just had to accept that was her way.
Yeah.
And the flip side I was on was when my dad was in a nursing home toward the end of his life, his wife kept saying, you need to come see him. You need to come see him. I'd seen him 2 months earlier and I knew he wasn't well and he was thin. And then he had the heart attack that put him in the nursing home.
Yeah.
And that he wasn't going to go home. And I said, no, I'm not. I said, I'm fine. I talked to him all the time. I was always in contact with the facility where he was, the social work and the nurses. And I made all the arrangements. And my stepsister was there on the ground.
Yeah.
But I was very at peace with my decision. She just thought I would regret not coming to see him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, I hear you.
Yeah.
But I never did.
Yeah. My best friend lost her father this year, but he had a ton of hardware in his back. And so as his body started to break down, so did all of that hardware. So for her to see him, she flew back and forth to Texas like twice. And it was difficult she would have preferred to stay home. But her sister was like, you're going to regret it. You're going to regret it. And now that it's over and done with, she regrets having to witness him in some pain.
Yes.
So I get let people have their own process.
Yes. Because
you can't
unsee.
Yeah.
You cannot unsee what.
Yeah.
And even going back to my friend Carol with the eating and all that, when I visited her and all the people there, because a lot of people in that unit, they didn't have visitors.
Yeah.
And they're like, and people said, you're such a good friend. I said, she was a good friend to me. And we were friends for 23 years.
Wow.
She was there for me the night that my brother died. I was there for her with her divorce. We were very close friends.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to stop going to see her.
Yeah.
Just because it's hard for me.
Yeah.
Did I cry in my car on the way home? Yes, I did. But I went to the support group through Alzheimer's. I got my education. And that's a lot of what it is, I think, is to take away that fear of the unknown for people and just say, this is how this is going to happen. This is going to be the progression as the body shuts down. That's pretty easy for the doctors and the nurses to predict.
Yeah. Have you seen that documentary, One Last Hug?
Yes.
Oh, heart-wrencher, right?
Yes.
After my mom died, I sent both of my kids to Camp Hope. They did that, like a 4-day grief thing. It was really therapeutic for them. Especially for my daughter to have her own process outside of me.
Yes.
So that was, I loved it. I was like, this is amazing. I don't know why more people don't know about this.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I read a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Frances Weller after my brother died. And that's very ritual based. It's very ancient wisdoms from indigenous people that basically say the bottom line is we are not meant to grieve and mourn alone. We're meant to do it in community. And at that time, he was offering a weekend, grief ritual weekend.
Wow.
That I went to. And I had felt I was living. I guess I should say I was existing. I wasn't really living. I had really numbed out.
Yeah.
Because of the shock of it and just the foundational unfairness of it to me. And so it was a different type of grieving than I had done before.
Yeah.
And I wasn't myself. And I felt really stuck. But going to that 3-day weekend of listening to other people, of doing writing, of singing songs, and of learning about this indigenous wisdoms opened me up so I could cry and I could let it out. and I could start really healing in earnest.
Yeah.
After being able to be opened up again.
Yeah.
After being closed down and numbed out for
for
a
sure.
long time.
For sure. I know when my mom died, I felt like my whole entire world changed. So then I had to go and change my whole entire world. Like I sold my house. I probably shouldn't have done that. I made a lot of crazy, irrational decisions. Though that first 6-8 months, had I known, probably you shouldn't do anything for the first year. But
that's the long-term advice that people give.
yeah.
And I think that probably does work for some people.
Yeah.
But my sister-in-law sold the house and moved about 8 months after my brother died.
Yeah.
And that was what she needed to do.
Yeah.
And I don't blame her at all. I don't hold, I told her, you're the only one who can decide that.
Yeah.
And if you're at peace with that decision, then go ahead.
Yeah.
Because it was a huge house and there were too many memories there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like, for me too, I was like, my mom will never walk up this driveway again. I don't even want to be here. Like the whole entire landscape had changed for me. So then I needed to change everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But the part about when I help clients prioritize what's really important to them in the limited amount of time that they have left, that really allows them to focus on those things.
Yeah.
And especially if people say they want to take a trip.
Yeah.
And again, depending on what their disease and their illness is, then do prioritize that.
Yeah.
While you still can. Because again, the time isn't guaranteed and you just don't know when those limitations are going to come in.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that. But just to be able to let them choose what they want to do.
Yeah.
And take away the things that they don't want to do or bother themselves with anymore.
Yeah. Oh, all my mom wanted was chicken adobo. And of course, as soon as the damn liver doctor came in, he was like, oh my, what is that soy sauce over there? And I was like, look, she wanted it. I'm going to provide. We were so bad. We snuck her out of Valley Care in a wheelchair and got her margaritas and cigarettes, took the oxygen off. That's what the hell she wanted. We're in the parking lot. She's smoking cigarettes and drinking a margarita. And I was just like, this hospital is sick of us. Right. I know she intended to continue to like go down this path with the doctor of, let's keep trying. But I knew in my heart, oh no, we got days here.
Yeah.
So I stayed at Valley Care with her for 7 days. Yeah. And then I finally and I think for her, she really didn't want me to be there when she knew. And she was like, it was going to be my husband's birthday the next day. And she said, Christina, just go home and take a shower. So I was like, I hadn't had a nice, good shower, right? Hotel size shampoo and all of the things and sleeping on that horrible chair bed thing at the hospital. So I finally went home and took a shower and I went and slept really well. And then I had a dream. I had a dream that I was sitting in my backyard and I could see all of the stars in the sky. And then all of a sudden, like a breaking of a cloud, but it was a breaking of the stars. And I could see a heart. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so pretty. That is so cool. Look at that. There's a heart in the sky. And then I wake up. Valley Care calls me. We need to know, because she was on the fence. We need to know, do you want us to intubate her or not? And it's 4:00 in the morning. And I'm like, I'm on my way there. And then as soon as I get there, they're rolling her into the other room to intubate her or whatever. And then on the door of the hospital room was a picture of a heart. And I was like, oh shit, this is it. This is it. And then that was it. She had already passed after I had probably about 4 a.m. when I was sleeping and I had that dream.
Yeah. My mom, she was in North Carolina and I called her to tell her when my flight was. I said, I'm going to arrive at 8 a.m. on Wednesday morning. And she said, oh, I'll already be gone by then. And I said, really? I said, are you in pain? Has something changed? She says, no, I just know I'm going to die on Tuesday. I said, okay, I hope that's not true, Mom. I love you. And can I talk to Lee? My little brother was there. And I said, what was that?
Yeah.
He said, no, I hadn't heard her say that before. Because she just started a week earlier. She said, oh, I have cancer. I'm going to die. I was like, yeah, I know, Mom. And is there anything else you want to talk about? And she wouldn't talk about anything else. Yeah. But she died while I was on the plane.
Wow.
From here to there. And when my brother picked me up at the airport, he said, yeah, sorry. They called me at 6 a.m. So she wasn't too far off.
So was it Tuesday?
It was Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. But it was close enough.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, they know. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you think families should know about your services, how to engage with you?
Like I said, I certainly am available, and there are plenty of other doulas in Alameda and Contra Costa County.
You're the only one that I've met. You know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There are about 30 of us.
Wow.
According to the directories, the national organization and the international organization both have searchable directories.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually having a gathering next Tuesday. A couple of local doulas are putting together. They put out a siren call to anyone who wants to gather. So we're gathering on Tuesday in Oakland to have a conversation and see what comes of it. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
And like I said, you just don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
And it's not an either or. It's not hospice or a doula. It can be both.
Yeah.
I feel like a doula fits in the best when there's not a large circle of support around that person, and they really do need more than hospice can provide. And it's not about giving up. It's about getting what you want and putting down on paper and communicating with your family and loved ones what you do want and what you don't want.
Yeah.
And you still have a voice. Just that your illness doesn't define you.
Yeah.
You still have choices in those last days and weeks and hours of your life.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
your time
Christine.
here. This has been so wonderful and insightful. And how can folks get in touch with you? Tell that camera right there.
You can email me at julie@finalseasondoula.com. And my number is 925-369-2015. Thank you so much.